Hello everyone. Today we are going to discuss about what is superior oblique palsy, that is SO palsy, or also called as the fourth nerve palsy or trochlear palsy. So we all know that the fourth nerve, the trochlear nerve, is completely motor in nature and supplies the superior oblique muscle of the eye. So let's go and see how it is said. So before we go on to the paralysis of the fourth nerve, it is important to understand the anatomy and course of fourth nerve. So the superior oblique muscle is placed above the eyeball, which is coming from the trochlea, and it then goes on to insert itself onto the eye globe. So the trochlear nerve is one of the nerve which arises from the dorsal part of the brain, that is rather the midbrain. So it has some of the important aspects, like it is the only cranial nerve that arises from the dorsal aspect of your brain, that is the midbrain, and it is the only nerve to cross over and go on and insert itself into the oblique muscles, and it is the longest and thinnest of all the cranial nerves. So if you see, this is the green one is the one which is your trochlear nerve. So what happens is, these are the nuclei from where your nerves are arising. So the right side supplies to the left side and the left side supplies to the right side. So there is a crossover of the nerves, and this is the dorsal aspect of the brain. So this diagrams basically gives you the different site of injuries where it could happen. So this could be either at your nuclei, either at the crossover, either at the cavernous sinus, or either at the orbital fissure. So these are the possible part where your nerve can get damaged and the person can go into a fourth nerve palsy or a superior oblique palsy. Coming on to the etiology, so etiologically it could be either a congenital paralysis, a trauma, either it could be idiopathic, vascular and neurogenic, or either it could be a cavernous sinus and superior orbital fissure syndrome. So when we say the term congenital paralysis, it is quite often that almost 40% of the cases are because of congenital paralysis resulting from the defect in the nucleus or the motor portion of the nerve. So the nucleus which is present into your brain, so either that could be having a defect or either the motor portion of the nerve can be defective. So that is how you see congenital paralysis. And trauma, when we say trauma, is basically your one of the most important reason. Around 34% of the cases of SO palsy are because of the close head injury. So what happens whenever you have a close head injury, that is your, there are kind of two injuries, that is open head or close head. Open head means there is a wound which is open and exposes the brain. Close head injuries means there was no open injury which led to the exposure of brain. So let's say there was a hard hit onto the brain which led to a counter cup injury. So what happens, the brain goes ahead and hit the skull and comes back because of the spring action and hits back as well. So because of this, there are high chances that the fourth nerve can get affected, as it is the thinnest and your longest nerve. So it could be getting affected with the tentorial edges. So due to the impact area to the anterior medullary velum, where two nerves decussate, so bilateral trochlear nerve palsy can quite easily happen there. So next is your idiopathic. So 20% of the cases, the reason cannot be asserted, that exactly what is the reason of the patient to have a fourth nerve palsy. So that is comes under your idiopathic. Next is your vascular and neurogenic. So when I say the term vascular, this is abnormality into your vessels. So around 3 to 5% of the cases are your vascular and neurogenic. So it could be either aneurysms or tumor. So basically aneurysms are nothing but bulging out of your vessels because of the excessive pressure and the damage to the vessel wall. So when such things happen, they can start compressing your nerves. So what happens, that the nerves which are present, we all know there is a huge network of blood vessels inside the brain. So if any of the blood vessel has got an aneurysm which is compressing the path of your fourth nerve that can lead to the improper functioning of it, leads to your fourth nerve palsy, or either it could be your neurogenic, which is basically diabetic neuropathy. So occasionally it is seen that it involves your trochlear nerve. So what happens that the myelin sheath which is present around the nerve, that is getting deteriorated, and because of which the conduction system which is here inside the nerve, it starts radiating all the energy here itself, and it is unable to withhold the transmission properly, and the function of the nerve is usually affected and could lead to paresis or paralysis. So that is one of the reasons. Also it could be because of herpes zoster. So even in herpes zoster, we find many of patients having a fourth nerve palsy, as it affects the trochlear nerve. Next is your cavernous sinus and your superior orbital fissure syndrome, also called as your Tolosa-Hunt syndrome. So what happens here, we all know the cavernous sinus which is present here right at the base of your skull. So from here many important structures like your cranial nerves, the optic nerve, optic chiasma, and everything is passing from here. So if there is any abnormality or any problem here, that could lead to your paralysis to the fourth cranial nerve. Also it compresses the third nerve, so many times it is seen in Tolosa-Hunt syndrome that the third and the fourth nerve, both of them are getting affected, and both of them are paralyzed simultaneously. And if the lesion is very small, which is only compressing the fourth nerve, then it will only have an isolated fourth nerve palsy. Coming on to the clinical features, so in clinical features, first of all you will see a cyclovertical deviation. Usually the involved eye is elevated. So if you see in this case, the eye which is involved, it is slightly into an elevated state, and it will be slightly adducted, that is it is slightly inside, and it is extorted. So because your functions of the superior oblique are depression, abduction, and intorsion, so all these functions are getting paralyzed, so all the opposite function will get enhanced. So as there is no depression present, the eye is going in, sorry, upwards. So as the eye cannot go much outward, so it is into an adducted state, and as the eye cannot intort, it goes into an extorted state. So that is how you see the deviation, cyclovertical deviation. An abnormal head posture is very commonly seen in these patients, so that is typically done to avoid the amount of your diplopia. So you generally see that the amount of head posture which is changed, the chin is depressed, it will be slightly downwards. Your face would be slightly turned towards the opposite side, and head is tilted towards the opposite shoulder. So generally what happens, the chin would be slightly down, and all the opposite side, the patient will have a head tilt, and the patient will turn his your head towards that side. So the degree of abnormal head posture is not always proportional to the size of hypertropia. So that will depend that at what particular head posture the patient is having the least amount of diplopia. Next is amount of diplopia is more in your downward gaze, as the patient cannot depress the eye. So it is noticed only when the patient is looking in the downward gaze. So the patient might give you a common complaint that whenever he tries to read a book or sees anything in the down gaze, there is a homonymous vertical diplopia, and he sees two images which are one over the other. So generally it is seen in the down gaze very commonly. Coming on to the ocular movements, when we say, so in this, let's take an example. If the patient has the right eye which is affected, the movements of the left eyes are also limited when looking down and to right. So overaction of the left eye looking up. So because if you see here, the patient is having or rather left eye hypertropia. So the moment patient will try to look up, there will be an upshoot. Okay, and as you ask the patient to look into the affected side, that when you ask the patient to look in right and left side, you can find whenever there is adduction, there is an over elevation, and whenever there is an abduction of that eye, the amount of over elevation reduces. So these are the movements which are generally seen. Coming on to diagnosis, you can simply perform a Parkes 3-step test. So you check for the primary gaze, you find out that the left eye is hypertropia. You ask for the patient to look at right and left gaze, and then you see that in right gaze the elevation is more, and left gaze the patient has less, and then you ask the patient to do a right and left tilt. So you will find out that in this case the patient is having a left superior oblique palsy. So this is very simple to understand. If you have already gone through the video of your investigations of paralytic squint, in that it has been already explained. So Parkes 3-step test is very easy and simple to perform and identify superior oblique palsy. So also you can find out with the help of your diplopia charting. So in diplopia charting, if you see your left superior oblique, here what I have done, we have asked the patient to wear a red and green glass, and then we have performed the what we say, your diplopia charting. So as we know, in up gaze there will be no deviation because already the eye is in hypertropia, the other eye can follow it, and there will be no deviation in up gaze. But as you ask the patient to look in down gaze, there will be more amount of deviation, especially when you ask the patient to look at your lower left side, sorry, lower right side, the patient will have a more amount of deviation. So this is how you do your diplopia charting, and you can find such an kind of interpretation. Also Hess charting, when you will do, you can find out that in fourth nerve palsy there is no much significant difference in the chart, but as you can see, there will be an underaction of the superior oblique in your right chart. So in this eye, if you see field of the right eye shows there is an underaction of the superior oblique and overaction of the inferior oblique, whereas vice versa will be seen into the other eye, that is left eye will show the overaction of the inferior rectus, which is basically your yoke muscle of the right superior oblique, and underaction of the superior rectus. So already the eye is into hypertropia, so what will happen, the superior rectus will start underacting. So this is the kind of Hess chart which you generally see in a patient with superior oblique uh, palsy. So how do you differentiate if it is a unilateral or a bilateral? So simple, that esotropia will be less in down gaze whenever the patient is having a unilateral superior oblique palsy, whereas if it is a bilateral case, you will find out that it is a V pattern esotropia. That means the patient, when it looks down, he will have more amount of esotropia when compared to your normal position or the primary position. X cyclodeviation would be less than 10 degree. The amount of X cyclodeviation which is present would be less than 10 degree in unilateral cases, and it will be more than 10 degree in your bilateral cases. The duction of your superior oblique is normal. So if there is a unilateral case, your ductions would be normal in your superior oblique, whereas the ductions would be diminished in a case with bilateral superior oblique palsy. Head tilt test will show you positively that only one eye is getting affected, whereas if it is a bilateral case, you will find out that either eye, whenever it is tilted, the amount of hypertropia is increasing even in right or left head tilt. Now that is how you differentiate between a unilateral and a bilateral case. So how do you differentiate if it is a congenital or an acquired case? So congenitally there will be a presence of amblyopia, whereas if it is acquired, the amblyopia will not be present. It is very uncommon to find it. The patient will not complain about your apparent tilting in congenital because he has already developed with the sensory adaptations, whereas the patient with an acquired squint of your fourth nerve palsy will tell you that he has everything a bit tilted. So that is how you generally see. Abnormal head posture will be noted since childhood photographs. So congenital patients are generally having a abnormal head posture since the childhood, whereas abnormal head posture will be acquired later for the patient in acquired palsies. So if you ask the patient for old photos and new photos, you will find out that the acquired head posture has been recently adopted after the manifestation of the squint. Presence of increased vertical vergence. So if you will check the vertical vergence of a patient with congenital superior oblique palsy, there will be an increase in the vertical vergence, whereas your increase in vertical vergence will not be seen in a case with acquired palsy. So coming on to the treatment part, so as your superior oblique is paralyzed, so what you can do is you can do a tightening procedure, which is also called as the Harada-Ito procedure. So what we do is we cut the your superior oblique muscle, take it slightly forward and ahead so that it will give a tightening effect to the globe, and even if it is paralyzed or underacting, so that will still have a depressing action present and keep the eye into a primary position and decrease the amount of diplopia in downward gaze. So at least the patient will have a lesser amount of discomfort for his reading and other procedures. So Harada-Ito procedure is the one which is commonly done in surgical procedures. Other measures which can be taken as a non-surgical treatment protocol is either you can patch the eye which is affected, so that can be done with a contact lens, that is occlusive contact lens, or what we say a tape over the glasses. So the affected eye which is causing the diplopia, you can tape that eye with a particular sellotape or something which occludes the vision from that eye, so that the patient can have a single vision. Other measures which can be done is your prisms. So you can use your vertical prism, that either a base up or a base down. So if the patient is having a hypertropia, so you use a base down prism into that, so that the amount of diplopia is reduced. So that can be either given with full prism or either a Fresnel press on prism. So if you see in this image, the prism is only given into the lower half, because the patient is having diplopia onto the lower half and not onto the upper half. So what will happen whenever the patient will try to look down, this prisms will help him to reduce the amount of diplopia. So these are the treatment procedures which are done in your superior oblique palsy. I hope this video helped you to understand what is fourth nerve palsy, how it is characterized, how to differentiate between your congenital, acquired, your unilateral and bilateral, and what are the clinical features and treatment of your fourth nerve or superior oblique palsy. Thank you for your patient listening and attending this lecture. Thank you and goodbye.